You're listening to the Internet Audio Feed.
I am sitting here at my desk today in October, longing for someone to hug me and encourage me to keep strong and hold my head high. This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure and serious head injury, in order to make the path clear. Those are the words of Diana Spencer, Princess of Wales, in a 1996 letter to her butler, Paul Burrell. 4 years later, Diana died in a car accident.
Conspiracy? Maybe. Coincidence? Maybe. Complicated?
Absolutely.
Welcome to Conspiracy Theories, the podcast where we dig into the complicated stories behind the world's most controversial events and search for the truth.
If you want to listen to previous episodes, you can find them on your favorite podcast directory or on our website, parcast.com.
I'm Carter Roy.
I'm Molly Brandenburg.
And neither of us are conspiracy theorists.
But we are open-minded, skeptical, and curious. Don't get us wrong. Sometimes the official version is the truth.
But sometimes it's not.
Today, we're talking about the death of Princess Diana. Officially, she died in a car accident in Paris in 1997. Her driver was under the influence. The paparazzi were chasing them, and she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. A series of apparent coincidences concluded in tragedy.
But that's not the only story of how Diana died.
As much as I hate to say it, Diana is most famous for the man she married, Prince Charles of Wales, current heir to the British crown. They were married for a tumultuous 15 years, had 2 sons, Princes William and Harry, and were in the media constantly.
Constantly. We can't stress that enough. As soon as the royal engagement was announced in February of 1981, Diana was never able to leave the spotlight again.
Think about everything you've heard about Meghan Markle recently and amplify it by 10, because Diana was going to be queen.
Unfortunately, she suffered this public attention without ever ascending the throne. And the attention didn't diminish even slightly when she and Prince Charles divorced in 1996.
Because Diana died just 1 year later. Just after midnight on August 31st, 1997, the Mercedes S280 carrying Diana crashed into the 13th pillar of Paris's Pont de l'Homme tunnel.
Diana's lover, Dodi Fayed, and their driver, Henri Paul, died immediately. Diana died from her injuries, namely a torn pulmonary vein and displaced heart, 4 hours later. Her bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones, was the crash's sole survivor.
Her sons, William and Harry, were only 15 and 12 at the time. It was a tragedy.
But many people believe it wasn't an accident.
Before we jump headfirst into conspiracy theories, we need some context. First, the commonly accepted history leading up to the crash, and then the official version of what happened to Princess Diana that night in 1997.
But before that, I want to provide a quick aside on conspiracy theories and why they interest us. Conspiracy theories hinge on a concept called agenticity.
Agenticity is how a person looks at a series of events, finds a pattern, and assumes it means something. This is convenient if, say, you break out in hives whenever you eat watermelon, so you assume that means you're allergic to watermelon, and stop eating it, avoiding another outbreak of hives. But it's less convenient given that life is random. We don't have an obvious explanation for everything. So how do we find meaning?
Historically, humans find meaning through stories and storytelling. If something doesn't make sense, we create a story to explain it. Think about ancient folklore, which proposed solutions for the mysteries of life. People need answers, and if they don't get a satisfying answer, they create a narrative that aligns with the facts they have.
When creating these stories and searching for solutions, many people like to use Occam's razor, the concept that the simplest answer to a question is the correct one.
But we know the truth, even when everyone takes it for a fact, can be complicated.
especially when that true story doesn't comply with agenticity and follow a logical, understandable sequence of events.
To put it in movie critic terms, sometimes there are plot holes in the truth.
And real-life plot holes are open to be filled with conspiracy theories, creating new and intriguing stories.
We love stories, which is why we're excited to dive in, regardless of the lines between fact and fiction, which, in this podcast, may get a little blurry.
In general, we don't believe the Earth is flat, lizard people run the government, or NASA faked the moon landing. But we do believe that those are fascinating ideas, and the stories around them are worth telling.
But hey, we'll keep an open mind. And at the end of this, we might think Kubrick's greatest film starred Neil Armstrong, or that Princess Diana was killed by MI6.
Speaking of...
Exactly what I was thinking.
The most important person in this story is Diana herself. Before we go into detail about how she became a princess fearful for her life and then famous for her death, we want to humanize her.
There's a lot of negativity surrounding her death and why people wanted to kill her. So first, a few nice things about Princess Diana. A lady in her own right, the people's princess, and grandmother of adorable Prince George and Princess Charlotte. We think she would have been a wonderful, warm, and loving grandmother. For all the flaws the media and the royal family found in her, no one could deny Diana was great with children. She worked as a nanny and then a kindergarten teacher before she married Prince Charles.
Her own children recalled her as loving, with a great sense of humor. For example, when Prince William was about 13, he had posters of supermodels on his bedroom walls. Naomi Campbell, Christy Turlington, and Claudia Schiffer.
Is this one of those royals, they're just like us stories?
Not at all. When William came home from school one day, he discovered the models from his posters were in his home. Living, breathing Naomi Campbell, Christy Turlington, and Claudia Schiffer smiled and waved at him. William was speechless. For Diana, it was hilarious.
That's a fantastic prank. Well, despite their connections, Diana tried to keep her kids grounded. She made them wait in line like all the other kids when they made trips to Disney World and McDonald's.
And that's not the only reason she got the nickname the People's Princess. In 1987, at the height of the AIDS pandemic, patients were treated like lepers. It was commonly assumed that making skin-to-skin contact with an AIDS patient would get you sick. When Diana learned this information was in fact false, she shook hands with an AIDS patient without wearing gloves.
And like everything Diana did, it was photographed. She knew it would be photographed and used her celebrity status to single-handedly break down some of the stigma against AIDS. With a simple handshake, she humanized this patient and others suffering from AIDS.
Diana knew a human touch was important and helped bring life to the sometimes frigid royal family. She frequently wrote personal thank you notes, which were described as effusive and touching. For these, she kept a memo sheet of hard-to-spell words prominently on her desk. She was going to get the details right.
Diana loved romance novels, and when she first came into the public eye, she looked like a stunning heroine in one of her beloved Barbara Cartland novels.
And while that's the image the royal family wanted everyone to see, it wasn't the truth.
If Diana was in a romance novel, she wouldn't be the heroine. She'd be the rival in the exciting tale of Camilla Shand.
Better known as Camilla Parker Bowles, or Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall.
Yes, the next major players in this story are Diana's ex-husband, Prince Charles, and his current wife, Duchess Camilla. To understand their involvement, we have to go back to the 1970s and the story of how Princess Diana became Princess of Wales.
In his youth, Prince Charles was a bit of a playboy, not unlike his son, Prince Harry. He was romantically linked to over 40 women before marrying, and that's just what's public knowledge.
When a big part of your job description is finding the future Queen of England and producing heirs, it makes sense to consider your options. But we don't think that's what was going on. In 1970, when Charles was in his early 20s, his ex-girlfriend introduced him to Camilla. There was an instant spark, and the pair soon started dating, often going to polo matches. They both loved the countryside and horses.
But the relationship faced many obstacles. Camilla had unfinished business with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Andrew Parker Bowles. And Charles' family did not approve of Camilla.
No, they did not. Per tradition, the royal family expected Charles to marry a beautiful, virginal woman, preferably with noble status. A tomboy, Camilla was not believed to be a great beauty. She had the history with Andrew Parker Bowles, and though she was from the upper class and had some noble blood, she had no title.
Lucky for her, Charles loved her, and love conquers all.
But in this case, love took some time to conquer. In 1973, Prince Charles shipped off with the Royal Navy. Because Camilla wasn't the girl his parents wanted him to marry, or perhaps because he didn't expect her to move on in his 8-month absence, Charles didn't ask Camilla to wait for him.
So Camilla reconnected with her old flame, Andrew. Camilla's savvy parents seized this opportunity to do what they believed was best for their daughter. They put out a newspaper announcement saying Andrew Parker Bowles had proposed to Camilla.
He'd done no such thing. However, decorum was still very important among the British upper class in the 1970s. To avoid shame, Andrew was forced to propose to Camilla, and she was forced to accept. They married a few months later in what was called the Society Wedding of the Year.
It's said that when Charles learned of the engagement, he cried all night. But he had no power to change the situation. He had to act like a prince and keep his emotions in check. So Camilla and Charles remained friends.
Which, as to be expected, didn't work. By 1980, Camilla was cheating on her husband with Charles, though, to be fair, Andrew was cheating on Camilla as well.
Over the years, Prince Charles faced mounting parental pressure to marry just the right girl. He was heir to the throne. He had a duty to his family and country. He was over 30, and he needed a wife.
In 1977, he'd found a seemingly solid option in Lady Sarah Spencer, daughter of the Earl Spencer, Viscount of Althorp. In addition to owning a country estate and a home in London, the Spencers could trace their lineage back to England's Stuart monarchs in the 1400s, as well as other European noble houses, including the Habsburgs and Medicis. Charles and Sarah's relationship didn't work out, but through Sarah, he met her teenage sister, Lady Diana. As a noble from one of the Wright families, Diana had actually been a childhood playmate of Charles's younger brothers, Princes Andrew and Edward, back in the 60s. But due to their 13-year age gap, Diana and Charles weren't introduced at that time. In 1980, when Diana was of legal age, she and Charles reconnected at a polo match. At 18, she had no romantic history, a high-ranking noble title, and undeniable beauty. For the royals, she seemed perfect. So, Charles married her.
And he married her fast. They saw each other 13 times between reconnecting at that polo match in 1980 and the televised fairy tale wedding on July 29th, 1981.
It was like The Bachelor on steroids.
Like most Bachelor franchise relationships, it was a mess.
Because, like many Bachelor contestants, Diana came with baggage. When she was a young girl, her mother left. Her parents were divorced by the time Diana was 7. A few years later, Diana's father remarried, which might have been fine, but he remarried in secret and didn't inform any of his children he was taking a new wife until the ink was dry.
Diana felt betrayed by both parents. She longed for a strong, loving family, and she became terrified of the idea that she might one day get a divorce too.
And prior to meeting Prince Charles, Diana joked that she wanted to marry him because the royals were famously averse to divorce, and Charles was the only man who could never divorce her.
Ironic.
It didn't help that Diana was only 20 when she married 32-year-old Charles. She wasn't ready for this monumental decision or the incredible life she was thrust into, but she so greatly desired a family who would never leave her that she jumped into marriage.
The choice would define the rest of her short life. Time for a quick change of subject.
Mystery, manipulation, murder. Cults are associated with all of these things. But what really goes on inside a cult? If you're interested in what goes on inside the minds of cult leaders and their followers, you have to check out another Parcast podcast, Cults. Every Tuesday, my friends Greg and Vanessa dive deep into the psychology behind cults. They analyze cult leaders, their lives, and the people who follow them.
I highly recommend listening to the show. I subscribed so I never miss an episode.
You can listen to episodes on Heaven's Gate and the People's Temple right now. The show always looks into interesting, twisted, mysterious cults, so stay tuned each week as they investigate the cult leaders and their followers. Visit Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts and search for cults. Again, that's CULTS, or visit parcast.com/cults to start listening now. That's Parcast, PARCAST.com/cults to listen now.
Just as I'm always looking for an intriguing podcast to listen to, I'm also always searching for something quick and delicious for dinner, because I rarely have enough time in the day to buy, prep, and make a healthy dinner for my family.
If you're also short on time, it's time to check out HelloFresh.
HelloFresh is a meal kit delivery service that shops, plans, and delivers ingredients so you can make healthy, delicious recipes.
I don't have to spend hours planning meals and grocery shopping. There are tons of one-pot recipes, which make for an easy cleanup. Plus, each meal is less than $10.
I just choose a delivery day that works for me, and everything is brought to my doorstep in recyclable, insulated packaging.
With 3 plans to choose from, including classic, veggie, and family, there is something for everyone.
I always look forward to my HelloFresh delivery because it makes dinner that much easier.
For $30 off your first week of HelloFresh, visit HelloFresh.com and enter the code THEORIES30. That's HelloFresh.com. Offer code THEORIES30 for $30 off your first week of HelloFresh.
In their wedding photos, Prince Charles and Princess Diana are the picture of a fairy tale happily ever after. But this picture quickly shattered. Just a few months into marriage, Diana got pregnant, doing her royal duty. But she became paranoid, worrying that Charles had lost interest in her.
Do you think he didn't seem interested in Diana because he was still madly in love with Camilla and wished he'd married her?
It seems possible. There could have been other factors in play, too. Remember Diana's history of feeling abandoned? And don't forget, she was going through hormonal changes. Recent studies led by neuroscientist Elsaline Hochzema in Europe show that pregnant women's brains develop a better ability to understand other people's thoughts, feelings, and intentions. The increase in emotional intelligence as a result of pregnancy may have led Diana to realize that Charles never liked her much in the first place.
Interesting.
Regardless of the cause, in less than a year, the prince and princess's relationship was falling to pieces. Diana later claimed that she threw herself down the stairs while pregnant to get Charles' attention. Obviously, that didn't improve things.
Luckily, the fall didn't hurt the baby, and Prince William was born in June of 1982.
Harry followed in September of 1984. Apparently, Charles was openly disappointed that Harry wasn't a girl, and that he'd inherited red hair from Diana's side of the family.
If that wasn't enough to stoke the feud's fire, around this time, Diana learned that Charles had rekindled his affair with Camilla, if it ever stopped. Diana was reasonably upset, and to make things worse, she began suffering from an eating disorder and self-harming.
By 1986, Diana started having affairs of her own. For about 5 years, she secretly rendezvoused with her writing instructor, Army officer James Hewitt, and by 1989, she was spending time with car dealer James Gilby. Gilby later became infamous as part of Squidgygate, when a tape of Diana and Gilby's amorous phone conversation was released to the public in 1992.
Well, that moment was a boiling point in the years-long public feud dubbed the War of the Waleses.
In the early 1990s, news of Charles and Diana's failed marriage surfaced in the tabloids. But instead of hiding or denying it, both Diana and Charles used the media against each other to gain public sympathy.
Diana was an expert at manipulating the media. During her tenure as Princess of Wales, she befriended journalists, winning their favor by providing news tips. One such writer was Andrew Morton. In the early 1990s, while still married to Charles, Diana collaborated with him on the book Diana, Her True Story, which revealed the darker side of royal life. The book details her bulimia, her suicide attempts, and the pain caused by her husband's affair.
To take it from Diana herself, she was miserable. Publishing a tell-all was her revenge on the family who'd chosen her just because she looked the part of a perfect, spotless princess.
Diana did play that part to a degree. She refused to be identified as Morton's source for the book, claiming innocence while still a member of the royal family.
In fact, many people accused Morton of making most of his book up, until years later when he revealed his recorded interviews with Diana. The story was straight from her mouth. Diana wanted the story told, but she was smart enough to ensure the royal vitriol would fall on someone else.
Diana's connections and control over the media makes you wonder, were the paparazzi following Diana the day she died because she tipped them off on her location? Or had she merely opened a floodgate she was unable to close?
It's certainly suspicious that she was known for using the media, and journalists were so present at her death. But it's important to note that Charles was using the media as a weapon too, and sometimes the paparazzi worked against Diana. Remember Squidgygate that I mentioned earlier? In August of 1992, The Sun revealed they had a recorded phone conversation between Diana and her lover, James Gilby. In the recording, Gilby affectionately called Diana Squidgy, so the scandal became known as Squidgygate. This was, of course, not at all acceptable royal behavior. Diana was treading hot water.
But in January 1993, just a few months later, Charles was found guilty of the same crime when an even more scandalous recording of the Prince of Wales and Camilla became public. That became known as Camillagate, or more colorfully, Tampaxgate.
Essentially, Prince Charles was so eager to get away from Diana and near Camilla that, in this recorded phone conversation, he expressed a disturbing wish to be Camilla's tampon.
Oof. That kind of sentiment makes you wonder how far he'd go to be with Camilla. The man seems desperate.
Or he just didn't know how to clearly express his feelings. Up to this point, the British family was famously unemotional. Once, Queen Elizabeth came home from a months-long trip and greeted young Prince Charles with a handshake.
But thanks in part to Diana, the royals were embroiled in emotional scandal. She brought them down to earth, and then a little farther. Diana was a problem for them, and they needed to get rid of her.
That sounds ominous.
All I'm doing is pointing out a motive for their 1992 separation. Shortly after the Squidgygate and Tampaxgate leaks, Charles and Diana publicly split.
The royal family claimed the pair was trying to work it out, but that seems unlikely. In this very public breakup, the media had access to everything, and Diana had no escape.
So, of course, she tried to keep them under her sway. In 1995, Diana gave a scathing tell-all TV interview to Martin Bashir, further fueling the fire between the couple since she and Charles were still legally married. Later that year, things were so bad that the Queen officially ordered Charles and Diana to get a divorce.
This, more so than any journalist story or comment from the prince, actually seemed to scare Diana. As much as she seemed to dislike being married to Charles, she adored William and Harry and feared that she'd lose them if the divorce agreement didn't favor her. So at first, she resisted.
Some of the most powerful people in the world wanted to control her kids. Of course she resisted. I think anyone would. Though in Diana's case, it meant she held even less favor with the Queen. The divorce proceedings were contentious.
Finally, on August 28, 1996, Diana and Charles officially divorced.
Well, you'd think things would settle down when Diana was no longer Her Royal Highness, but just over a year later, Diana mysteriously died. Though Charles and Diana divorced in August of 1996, the royal family couldn't escape her. First off, she was the mother of future King Prince William and his brother Prince Harry. As she had since 1992, Diana maintained a residence in Kensington Palace and saw her children on alternating holidays. She lost the honorific Her Royal Highness, but maintained the title Princess of Wales.
Diana received a lump sum of approximately 35 million modern American dollars, and a smaller annual sum to maintain her royal office as mother of Princes William and Harry.
Between that, living in a palace, and continuing a public life, Diana was hardly done living like a royal. She was even allowed to keep the royal jewels she'd been gifted. You can imagine how this could have irritated the traditionalists in the royal family, including the Queen herself.
A large part of being a royal is public appearances. But after the separation, Diana announced she'd retire from them. She needed a break from the spotlight.
If I were her, I'd never want to leave my house again.
She had all the reason to quietly fade away, but she knew that would be letting the world down. Diana couldn't just leave her life of official appearances, fundraisers, and charity work. Soon, Diana was back to using her star power for good. In 1996 and 1997, she worked with the international campaign to ban landmines.
Specifically, Diana worked with NGOs that focused on removing unexploded landmines from former war zones. One such war zone was Angola, a country that had faced about 2 decades of civil war and now had fields full of landmines. These bombs were just waiting to go off, and when they did, people would be horribly maimed or killed. Diana was especially interested in removing landmines so parents wouldn't be killed and taken from their children, a cause near and dear to her heart, since she'd felt like she lost both of her parents as a child.
Diana even appeared in a television special on the subject in January 1997. She urged countries to put an international ban on landmines.
As you'd expect, landmine manufacturers and others profiting from a military-industrial complex were not happy with Diana's work. She made sympathetic videos to create an emotional appeal. In these videos, Diana's caring face comforted victims who were missing limbs, and her soft arms held landmine orphans. She made landmines an evil, along with those who profited from them.
Diana's activism helped the campaign make quick progress. Just a few months after her death, the work of the international campaign to ban landmines was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. And in 1999, the UN's Ottawa Treaty banning landmines became international law.
Unfortunately, Diana didn't live to see the success. Had being a public face of the movement made her a target?
It's not impossible. One last thing before we recount the events that led to Diana's death. We have to address her love life. Over 1996 and 1997, Diana dated Hasnat Khan, a Muslim Pakistani heart surgeon.
Normally, we wouldn't care what religion Diana's boyfriend was, but in this case, it's very important to note that Hasnat Khan, with whom Diana was madly in love with for about 2 years, was Muslim.
Apparently, Dr. Khan loved Diana back, but he did not love her global fame and the constant publicity, and this caused conflict in their relationship.
Sources disagree on how and why they broke up in July of 1997, because Hasnat himself has given multiple reasons, but most recently, during the 2008 inquest into Diana's death, he testified Diana dumped him for another man, Dodi Fayed.
The man she was with when she died.
Who, notably for many conspiracy theorists, including Dodi's own father, was also Muslim.
Dodi's another important piece of the story. The son of Egyptian business magnate, Dodi was heir to the Harrods luxury department store fortune and a movie producer on films, including Chariots of Fire and Hook. Notably, Dodi's billionaire father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, owned the Jonical yacht and the Paris Ritz, 2 of the last places Diana was seen alive.
Regardless of which story you believe, the Al-Fayed family was undoubtedly involved in Diana's death. I'm not saying they wished her any harm or actively killed her, but considering Diana died in an Al-Fayed car, driven by an Al-Fayed employee, traveling between 2 Al-Fayed properties while on vacation with Dodi Fayed, who died next to her, well, if she dated someone else, would Princess Diana be alive today?
If you believe some of the conspiracy theories, she'd have died anyways.
True. I'm just pointing out the pattern. You know, agenticity.
Right. In July 1997, Diana struck up a relationship with Dodi, and they spent most of the next 6 weeks together sailing the Mediterranean, even at one point joined by her sons.
The paparazzi followed, as always, getting prime pictures of swimsuit-clad Diana enjoying her vacation and kissing Dodi. These photos confirmed the relationship, but brought about minor scandal, since Dodi had, as far as the wider world knew, been engaged to Calvin Klein model Kelly Fisher.
But here he was, kissing Princess Diana, and everyone knew. The day the photos came out, Dodi called Kelly and broke off their engagement. Divorced from Prince Charles and oceans away from the royal family, Diana was still making headlines, and not the most positive ones in the eyes of the royal family.
Even better for the tabloids, on August 30th, Diana told her press contacts to prepare for an announcement the following day.
A dark irony. There would be an announcement that day. The announcement that the Princess of Wales had died.
Well, now for something we're excited to recommend.
I've been sleeping so much better since I got my Casper mattress. Casper is a sleep brand that's creating an exceptionally comfortable sleep experience.
I love that its breathable design keeps my body temperature regulated throughout the night.
With 3 mattress models, the original Casper, the Wave, and the Essential, Casper mattresses are perfectly designed to cradle your natural geometry.
Plus, Casper delivers right to your door, with free shipping and returns in the U.S. and Canada.
I wasn't sure how I was going to carry a mattress up my narrow staircase to my bedroom, but it was delivered in an impressively small box that made it easy.
The best part is that you can take the time to be sure of your purchase with Casper's 100-night risk-free Sleep On It trial. You spend 1/3 of your life sleeping, so you should be comfortable.
Get $50 towards select mattresses by visiting casper.com/theories and using theories at checkout. That's casper.com/theories. Offer code theories for $50 off your mattress purchase. Terms and conditions apply.
On August 30th, 1997, Diana Spencer, Princess of Wales, was 36 years old, had been divorced for a year and 2 days, and had been seeing Dodi Fayed for about 6 weeks. They'd sailed the Mediterranean together for the past 9 days. Diana hadn't seen her children in a month, but looked forward to reuniting with them the next day.
The following account of August 30th and 31st, 1997, is what is widely accepted as fact. That morning, Diana woke up in the luxurious Jonical yacht, moored outside Sardinia. She had breakfast with Dodi aboard the yacht, and by 11:30 a.m., they had left the boat for the mainland, planning to fly Dodi's private jet to Paris.
At about 3:20 p.m., they landed at France's Le Bourget airport. In Paris, Dodi made the odd choice of showing off the home his father was renting and renovating, Villa Windsor.
What's odd about that? They'd been staying on the Al Fayed yacht, and he later took her to the Al Fayed-owned Paris Ritz and the Al Fayed Paris apartment.
It's not odd that he wanted to show off his wealth. It's odd because Villa Windsor was once home of disgraced former royal King Edward VIII and his twice-divorced American wife, Wallis Simpson. At that point, in the 1930s, divorce was so frowned upon that Edward had to give up his crown to marry Wallis. He spent most of the rest of his life living in France and the Bahamas. This same royal distaste for divorce and divorced people cast its long shadow on Charles and Diana and factored into them spending so many years unhappily married. As you could imagine, this was an eerie, there's no escape kind of afternoon for disgraced, divorced royal Diana. Though it didn't last long.
That evening, Diana had a hair appointment, and Dodi had plans to go to Raposi Jewelers and pick up a diamond ring he'd had altered.
The ring was from Raposi's Tell Me Yes collection. An engagement ring, perhaps?
No one can confirm what Dodi's intentions for the ring were. What we can confirm is that Diana wore a ring from Dodi that night, but not the Tell Me Yes ring. The two reunited at the Ritz, the one owned by the Fayeds, and rested in the Imperial Suite before going to Dodi's apartment to get ready for dinner.
Seems odd that they would stop at the Ritz instead of just reuniting at the apartment, since the apartment was only 10 minutes away from the Ritz.
It is odd, but I think Dodi was showing off again here. He wanted to impress Diana, and for a former member of the British royal family, the bar is high. If you're keeping track, that's 4 Al Fayed properties Diana's been inside in one day. The yacht, the jet, Villa Windsor, the Ritz.
But they were back at the Ritz later that night. Why show it off in the afternoon?
They weren't planning to return to the Ritz after the afternoon visit.
Oh, well, that changes things.
It does. At the apartment, Diana had one last phone call with her children, who were at Balmoral Castle with their father and the Queen.
After checking on the kids, Diana and Dodi attempted dinner at Michelin-starred Chez Benoit. However, there were too many paparazzi, so they elected to return to the Ritz to dine.
Quite a bit of driving that day.
Dodi's apartment and Chez Benoit are each only about 10 minutes from the Paris Ritz, so it wasn't as bad as you'd think.
Oh, okay. Not long after Diana and Dodi arrived at the Ritz, diners in the hotel restaurant spotted Diana crying.
Interesting. Like she sensed tragedy was barreling toward her. Do you think she thought she was in danger?
Maybe. Or maybe she was just having a rough day.
Either way, the Ritz's restaurant had too many paparazzi too, so Diana and Dodi ended up having dinner in a suite.
Meanwhile, at the bar, off-duty Ritz head of security Henri Paul drank at least 2 glasses of a drink that appeared to be fruit juice, but was later revealed to be Ricard, a French liqueur stronger than wine.
However, he did not appear drunk to anyone who interacted with him.
That's because he wasn't just drunk, but mixing drugs. Henri was taking antidepressants Prozac and Tiopride, but they counteracted some of the effects of the alcohol, hiding how drunk he truly was. So, when Dodi Fayed roped Henri Paul into a plan to avoid the paparazzi, no one batted an eye.
Apparently, Dodi concocted a scheme to leave the Ritz unnoticed. He set up a decoy Mercedes with his official driver and bodyguards leaving out of the hotel's front door, making a big deal about the exit so all of the press would follow that car.
In the meantime, a smaller Mercedes S280, driven by Henri Paul, would transport Dodi, Diana, and just one bodyguard, Trevor Rees-Jones. If Dodi's plan worked out, Dodi and Diana could travel back to Dodi's apartment in peace.
Maybe they were done being photographed at the end of a long day, or maybe it had something to do with Diana's tears over dinner.
Either way, Henri Paul, who never normally drove the Fayeds, was driving the couple home.
Driving wasn't in Henri Paul's job description, and he wasn't even supposed to be working at that time. It's definitely suspicious.
What's worse is that Dodi's plan failed.
It did. Here's where we get to the official version of Diana's death.
This is a story determined to be factual by police inquest and accepted as the truth by the mainstream public.
Shortly after midnight, Diana, Dodi, Trevor Rees-Jones, and Henri Paul get into the Mercedes S280. Within minutes, the paparazzi realize where the princess is, and 10 journalists in 5 cars, 2 motorbikes, and 3 scooters follow their car, taking photos. In one photo of the exit, Henri looks drunk, Trevor looks worried, and Diana is turned away to avoid the camera. Dodi isn't pictured, but we know from the police reports that neither he nor Diana buckled their seatbelts. At Dodi's request, the car takes an indirect route to the apartment. To avoid being photographed, they drive along the Seine, taking the Cours Albert 1 road towards the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Over the previous 15 years, the tunnel had seen 34 crashes, resulting in 8 deaths. Not an unusually high number, but a precedent for danger.
Lord Stevens, former chief of Scotland Yard, later used a computer model to prove that Henri Paul lost control of the car along the Cours Albert 1 before even entering the tunnel.
Between 12:22 and 12:23 a.m. on Sunday, August 31st, 1997, the car descends steeply downhill into the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. The Mercedes carrying the princess flies deep underground, unstoppable. Entering the 4-lane passage, the darkness gets darker. Pillars line the center between the 2 directions of traffic, and tiny lights expose the low concrete ceiling. It's a 31-mile-per-hour zone, but the Mercedes speeds in at about 65 miles per hour. With a crunch, the Mercedes S280 minorly hits a white Fiat Uno and swerves. The car jerks left, right, back and forth. Veering forward, it smashes into the 13th pillar. The front crumples like a paper airplane. The impact instantly kills Dodi and Henri. Airbags puff open. The car's horn jams, blaring endlessly. Passengers toss around as the car spins, scraping away from the pillar. With a crash, the back of the car lands against the tunnel wall. Paparazzi screech to a halt. It's over. Less than 5 minutes have passed since they left the Ritz. Some paparazzi get expensive, exclusive shots, but those with a shred of decency rush to help the victims and call the police.
The first emergency call comes in at 12:26 a.m., about 3 minutes after the crash.
Within minutes of the crash, Dr. Frederick Mallier, who just happened to be passing by, stops to help. He notes that Diana has few external injuries, just a low pulse and a gash on her forehead.
Considering this led to her death, you'd think Diana would look worse.
You'd think.
At 12:30 a.m., the cops show up to investigate. 12:32 a.m., rescue workers arrive, noting that Diana is conscious but agitated and appears only mildly injured. 12:33 a.m., firefighters cut Diana out of the car. The shock of being moved puts Diana into cardiac arrest. 12:40 a.m., French rescue workers attempt to stabilize the Princess of Wales.
Stabilizing an injured victim before moving them from the scene of an accident is standard practice in France, though this move was later heavily criticized by Brits and Americans who believe she should have been rushed to the hospital immediately.
It's one more thing people put suspicion on. Would Diana have lived if the car crashed in England, or if France had different protocols?
But remember, at this point, she doesn't appear gravely injured, especially now that her heart's beating again. When a French doctor arrives at 12:45 a.m., he gives Diana Hypnovel and fentanyl to calm her down.
Notably, this combination of drugs sometimes causes heart and respiratory problems. And more notably, at 1 a.m., Diana has a heart attack. She receives CPR for 18 minutes. Once she's stable, the rescue workers seek permission to take Diana to Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital. It's not the closest hospital, but they believe it's the best equipped to handle her medical needs.
Another 10 minutes pass as they wait for approval to take her to the hospital. At 1:41 a.m., over an hour after the crash, Diana is finally en route to the hospital. The doctors urge the ambulance to drive slowly, afraid speed will worsen Diana's condition. Her blood pressure drops even lower, and at one point they stop completely to try to care for her. Diana doesn't make it to the hospital, which is only 3.5 miles from the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, until 2:06 a.m. Shortly after her arrival, her heart stops again. The doctors attempt to resuscitate her and realize she's bleeding internally. In the crash, Diana's heart shifted to the right side of her chest. Her pulmonary vein and pericardium tore, causing immense bleeding and explaining her low blood pressure observed at the scene of the crash.
The doctors do everything in their power to bring Diana back, but at 4 a.m., she's declared dead.
Goodbye, England's rose. May you ever grow in our hearts. You were the grace that placed itself where lives were torn apart.
The Princess of Wales was no more.
Candles burned out long before your legend ever will.
No one has held that title since.
Though horribly injured, Trevor Rees-Jones was the sole survivor. Unfortunately, his head injury prevented him from recalling many details of the night.
The only true witness, and he has an unreliable memory. Seems fishy.
Not considering the damage done to the car's other passengers.
Though the paparazzi chasing the car were initially blamed for the death of the most photographed woman in the world, they were eventually cleared. French authorities put together a 6,800-page dossier on the accident, which was reviewed by Scotland Yard as well. Autopsies discovered that Henri Paul's blood alcohol content was 1.74 grams per liter, more than 3 times the French legal driving limit of 0.5 grams per liter. After a 2-year investigation, it was determined that high speed, drunk driving, and not wearing a seatbelt killed Princess Diana. Some say she would have survived if the Mercedes hit the tunnel's wall first and not a pillar, or if she'd been wearing a seatbelt. Most people agree that it was pure bad luck.
Princess Diana died in a tragic, accidental car crash.
Or so we think. Here are 3 major theories claiming otherwise.
We aren't immediately endorsing these theories, just presenting them.
Theory number 1. Diana's work as an activist against landmines meant she was killed to protect the military-industrial complex.
Theory number 2. Diana faked her own death to finally escape the public eye.
Theory number 3. She was a threat to the British monarchy and assassinated by MI6.
Theory number 3 is the most complex theory, with iterations focusing on Islamophobia, the royal family's inability to control a woman intrinsically tied to their public image, or Charles simply needing her out of the way so he could finally marry Camilla.
Right. Remember that letter from the top of the episode where Diana worried her husband would arrange her death?
I remember. And I also know that letter goes on to say, quote, "My husband is planning an accident in my car. Brake failure and serious head injury in order to make the path clear for him to marry Tiggy. Camilla is nothing but a decoy, so we were all being used by the man in every sense of the word." End quote.
Tiggy.
Tiggy. The letter betrays Diana's true paranoia and reveals a much more complicated situation than Charles wanting to make way for his mistress.
Even more complicated, the case was reinvestigated just a few years later with Operation Paget starting in 2004.
Next week, we'll discuss.
Thanks for tuning in to Conspiracy Theories. If you want to hear more conspiracy theories, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, or your favorite podcast directory. If you like what you hear, leave a 5-star review. It seems simple, but it really helps our show.
And don't forget to subscribe. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Parcast and on Twitter at Parcast Network. Let us know what your favorite theory is.
Join us next week as we continue our second look at the death of Princess Diana.
Until then, remember, the truth isn't always the best story.
And the official story isn't always the truth. Conspiracy Theories was created by Max Cutler, is a production of Cutler Media, and is part of the Parcast Network. It is produced by Max and Ron Cutler, sound design by Ron Shapiro, with production assistance by Maggie Admire and Carly Madden. Conspiracy Theories is written by Maggie Admire and stars Molly Brandenburg and Carter Roy. If you enjoyed today's episode of Conspiracy Theories, you have to check out another Parcast podcast, Cults. Every week, hosts Vanessa and Greg explore the psychology behind cult leaders and the members who join their cults.
It's fascinating. I'm subscribed to the show, so I never miss an episode.
Visit Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and search for Cults. Again, that's CULTS. Or visit parcast.com/cults to start listening now. That's Parcast, PARCAST.com/cults to listen now.
You're listening to the Internet Audio Feed.
I'll admit it, I hate shopping for basics. You know, underwear, plain t-shirts. But Mack Weldon has made it so much better.
How so?
Their products are made with premium fabrics and designed for performance and comfort. Plus, my orders are shipped right to my door, so I don't even have to leave the house to shop. Go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off your purchase using the promo code THEORIES. That's MackWeldon.com, promo code THEORIES. Smoke sifts through the trees. A spring breeze whips across the forest, blowing the gray air into Inspector Jean-Michel Lauzon's face. He coughs as he follows the acrid scent into the thicket. He pulls aside a branch to see a flaming BMW. Inside, there's a man with a hole in his head. The authorities determine carbon monoxide poisoning from the smoke killed him. They insist the hole, which resembles a gunshot wound, is not from a gun. It's from a pressurized explosion brought out by the fire's heat. Officially, this discovery is deemed the gruesome, unusual suicide of an unsatisfied 54-year-old Frenchman. But he isn't just any middle-aged Frenchman. He's a paparazzo who made millions photographing Princess Diana in the weeks before she died. He claimed his images of the crash that killed Diana were explosive. He was questioned in connection to her death, and 3 years later, on May 4th, 2000, he turned up mysteriously dead.
Conspiracy? Maybe. Coincidence? Maybe. Complicated?
Absolutely. Welcome to Conspiracy Theories, the podcast where we dig into the complicated stories behind the world's most controversial events and search for the truth.
If you want to listen to previous episodes, you can find them on your favorite podcast directory or on our website, parcast.com.
I'm Carter Roy.
I'm Molly Brandenburg.
And neither of us are conspiracy theorists.
But we are open-minded, skeptical, and curious. Don't get us wrong. Sometimes the official version is the truth.
But sometimes it's not.
This is our second and final episode on the conspiracy theories surrounding the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. Last week, we covered the official story of how Diana died, as well as some context. This week, we talk about the unofficial stories, including MI6, medical sabotage, and the mysterious death of a photojournalist.
Officially, Princess Diana died from injuries caused by an accidental car crash. In the early hours of August 31st, 1997, the car carrying Diana, her lover Dodi Fayed, and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones hit the 13th pillar of the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. The crash was officially blamed on the car's driver, Henri Paul, who was legally intoxicated at the time. Henri and Dodi died on site. Diana died about 4 hours later, and Trevor survived with horrible injuries. But there are a lot of conspiracy theories about the death of Princess Diana, Dodi Fayed, and their driver Henri Paul. Shortly after their deaths, thousands of stories floated around claiming that it was the result of foul play, and about 35,000 conspiracy websites popped up.
And this was in 1997, when most of the internet was still dial-up.
Yet, even before Facebook, Twitter, or going viral, these theories prevailed, and in 1997, the majority of the public believed that Diana's death could not have been a mere accident. The blame fell on all kinds of groups, not just MI6, but everything from the CIA to the Committee, to the Mossad, Saddam Hussein, an ISIS precursor, the Freemasons, and even the Irish IRA. People may not have been able to agree who killed Diana, but most agreed that someone killed her.
All of these theories put intense scrutiny on the French investigation into the crash. This initial inquiry lasted 2 years. Finally, on September 3rd, 1999, the French authorities concluded that Diana's death was accidental.
But that didn't kill the theories. Sure, some people were content with what gave the picture of a thorough investigation, but others weren't. Most notably, Mohammed Al-Fayed, Dodi's father.
Even after the official verdict, Mohammed and his team would not let it go. So from 2004 to 2008, the Metropolitan Police, aka Scotland Yard, reinvestigated Diana's death, naming the case Operation Paget. Every conspiracy theory proposed by Al-Fayed was scrutinized in this official inquiry, headed up by Lord Stevens. They examined 175 iterations of the same idea because many of the suspicious elements had multiple explanations, all put forward by Al-Fayed.
And Mohammed Al-Fayed wasn't going to discount any possible version of what he knew to be the truth, that his son was murdered.
This week, we're going to examine some of the most viable theories. But first, let's look at it from a big picture perspective. As of 2017, car crashes kill approximately 1.3 million people per year worldwide. Why don't people believe a car crash killed Princess Diana?
Most people didn't know Diana personally, but for years they were watching her. It didn't feel like someone's real life. It felt like a movie.
Like how we all accidentally keep up with the Kardashians, even if we don't watch the show?
Yes, there was just as much drama. Diana was an extraordinary, beloved icon with an extremely exciting life. For years, everyone thought she'd eventually be the Queen of England. After everything we covered last week, would you really expect her to die because she didn't buckle up her seatbelt?
No, that's a disappointing ending.
Exactly. Our basic instincts scream that such an incredible person should have an incredible ending. And that's why it's challenging for people to believe in the official version of her death.
Everyone wants to see a satisfying resolution to her story, and it's easiest to believe that Diana's complicated life story came to a complicated conclusion.
Human psychology plays a part in these theories, but suspicious details play a bigger part. Even if Diana hadn't been world famous, some of the details surrounding her death would raise eyebrows.
Diana was extremely paranoid, which means either she was struggling with her mental health or she knew something we didn't.
Or both. Fear for her life might have contributed to the bulimia and depression she admitted to struggling with. What we do know is that Diana was, at times, worried for her own life. Regardless of the cause, we have to consider her experience valid. A prime example is the 1996 letter to her butler we read last week. Quote, "My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure and serious head injury in order to make the path clear for him to marry Tiggy."
Tiggy Legg Bourke was William and Harry's nanny. She was hired in 1993, shortly after Charles and Diana formally separated. During this time, she became a surrogate mother to the boys when they were in Charles' care, referring to them as my babies and criticizing Diana's parenting. In 1997, William asked both of his parents not to come to the Parents' Day 4th of June celebrations at Eton, but instead brought Tiggy.
I can see why Diana would feel insecure about Tiggy. That's another woman mothering her children.
Tensions were at the ultimate high between them in 1997. Diana once made Tiggy burst into tears by accusing her of miscarrying Charles' baby, and Tiggy even temporarily left her job.
A miscarriage? Did Tiggy have a relationship with Charles?
In Diana's head, she did. However, there was never any confirmed relationship between Charles and Tiggy, other than employer-employee. Tiggy later admitted she once had a crush on the prince, but it was just that. Tiggy left the royal family service to get married in 1999. There's no evidence she was ever involved with Charles.
That's fair.
Though that letter is eerie, I'd chalk up the Tiggy mention to Diana's paranoia. And if we believe that about the Tiggy portion, we can easily believe that about the whole letter.
Or we could believe that Diana only had some of the facts when she wrote the letter, that she knew she might die in a manufactured car accident, but was so distracted by the role Tiggy was playing in her son's lives that she could come up with no other motivation for the plot.
That's not impossible. But we can both agree that Charles didn't rig Diana's car crash to make way for Tiggy.
To make way for Tiggy, no. In pursuit of something else? Well, the other circumstances are too suspicious to discount yet. Diana had angered some very powerful people, from the Queen of England to the arms industry.
On top of that, Diana had eschewed professional protection as member of the royal family. Yes, even after the divorce, she was still considered a member of the family, so she didn't have any bodyguard acting purely in her favor. When she died, she was under the protection of Trevor Rhys-Jones, Fayyad's British bodyguard, and Henri Paul, head of security at the Ritz. But neither of them were working for Diana. There wasn't a bodyguard solely protecting her.
And we can't ignore the fact that she died in a tunnel. It's dark, it's secluded, and it's simply easier to get away with murder in a tunnel than on an open street.
And most importantly, there were no cameras in this particular tunnel at this particular time.
Exactly. There was a traffic camera that photographed all cars entering the tunnel and documented their speeds in an attempt to crack down on speeding and prevent accidents. However, this camera turned off after 11 p.m. each evening, so we don't have the photo of the Mercedes entering the tunnel, nor do we have any other security camera footage. The Paget report, the 871-page document produced by Operation Paget...
871 pages. No wonder conspiracy theorists go wild over this.
Yeah, it is very thorough. As I was saying, Chapter 5 of the Paget report details that as many as 14 cameras were positioned along the 2.5-kilometer route between the Ritz and the tunnel, but they were all private security cameras. And apparently, none of them had recorded any usable images of the Mercedes carrying Diana. In short, there's no publicly available video or photos of the minutes leading up to the crash, or the crash itself.
We only have photos of the aftermath, the smashed car in the tunnel.
And as far as proof goes, there's a gaping hole.
And then there's Diana's warning to her contacts in the press to prepare for a big announcement on August 31st. Her death left everyone hanging.
What was this announcement? Was the accident manufactured to scare Diana into following a gag order and never intended to result in her death? Or did someone determine the only way to guarantee her silence was to kill her?
And if she was murdered, who did it?
Let's look at some major theories and see which one, if any, best holds up. Throughout this portion of the podcast, I'll be presenting the details of each theory, and Molly will be providing the factual context and comparisons to the official story.
We'll both poke holes in each theory, and then we'll determine if there's enough evidence for the theory to be believable.
Okay, theory number 1. Diana was killed to protect the military-industrial complex.
As we discussed last week, Diana was a beloved activist, and she was most recently a public face for the international campaign to ban landmines. Did her campaign for peace scare those profiting off of landmines so much they wanted to kill her?
Lawyer Michael Mansfield claimed it did. During Operation Paget, he said Diana had a diary with a list of names of Brits profiting from the landmines industry that she planned to expose. Mansfield believed the list and Diana's death were, quote, not unrelated.
Mansfield, a self-described radical lawyer, had made a career out of defending underdogs in high-profile cases and has been awarded the title Queen's Counsel, a prestigious honor bestowed on some of England's best and most experienced lawyers.
However, Mansfield's supposed list of names was never produced. Conspiracy theorists would say it was confiscated by the people who killed her, but it's also possible it never existed.
Looking beyond that list, there's certainly motivation to the military-industrial complex theory. In 1996, the global arms trade volume was $42.7 billion US dollars. There's vast amounts of money to be made through weapons production and war, and anyone who fights for peace threatens the profits of massive corporations like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman.
Any conspiracy theorist worth their salt will assure you that corporations have no problem committing atrocities to protect business interests. And when your job is to engineer weapons or strategize military tactics, you'll have no trouble taking care of a person deemed dangerous, especially when it's not just a corporation, but someone at the top, like the people on Diana's alleged list.
Is that what happened here?
Well, though he's clearly a brilliant and qualified mind, Mansfield wasn't just a lawyer, he was one of Mohammed al-Fayed's lawyers.
Oh.
As credible as he is, he was being paid to prove that Diana and Dodi died as a result of foul play. We can't disprove this theory, but that does lessen its weight.
It does. And secondly, this theory doesn't outline a scenario explaining how this happened, or propose which individual people are responsible. As far as believability goes, I'd give it a 4 out of 10. The motivation is there, but all it is motivation. I think our next conspiracy theory is much more plausible.
Now, here's something we're proud to share with you. If you love our show, and maybe the sound of my voice, I know you'll enjoy my other podcast, Unsolved Murders. Every Tuesday, my co-host Wendy and I explore the facts of a cold case, and using in-depth research, we theorize what happened. Just like conspiracy theories, we analyze facts and evidence, and then come up with what we believe is the truth. Plus, Unsolved Murders features voice actors and special sound effects that put you right at the scene of the crime.
Unsolved Murders is packed with mystery and suspense. So if you're looking for your next podcast series to binge listen, there are plenty of episodes available to meet your needs.
That's right. New episodes of Unsolved Murders come out every Tuesday. So visit Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and search for Unsolved Murders. Or visit parcast.com/unsolved to start listening now. That's Parcast, parcast.com/unsolved to listen now.
And if you're searching for more mystery and true crime podcasts, I also highly recommend Serial Killers.
Every Monday, the hosts of Serial Killers, our friends Greg and Vanessa, take a deep look into the minds, methods, and madness of the world's most notorious serial killers.
Not only do they discuss their crimes, but the hosts also look into the lives of the killers to analyze their psychology and aim to uncover what may have led them to commit such atrocious acts.
Just like Conspiracy Theories and Unsolved Murders, Serial Killers is produced by Parcast, the same network that brings you Conspiracy Theories. So, it provides high-quality facts and intrigue, delivered with top-notch sound quality.
You can check out episodes on Eileen Wuornos and the Zodiac Killer now. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Visit Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and search for Serial Killers. Or visit parcast.com/serial to start listening now. That's Parcast, parcast.com/serial to listen now.
Time for conspiracy theory number 2, which is the main theory proposed by Mohammed Al-Fayed and his team of super lawyers, and the one he insists on to this day.
Theory number 2. Dodi Fayed and Princess Diana were killed by MI6 on orders of Prince Philip.
That's Queen Elizabeth's husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, and Prince Charles' father.
There are many iterations of this theory, so we're only going to go through the most convincing and intriguing ones. It would take hours to cover all of them, but they all put the blame on Prince Philip and MI6.
It's interesting that Mohammed landed on Prince Philip as the mastermind, and not Charles or the Queen herself.
Right. The Queen's in charge, and Charles was most closely connected to Diana.
If you look at the family through the lens of the time, it makes a little more sense. The general public viewed Charles as ineffectual, but Philip is known for being direct and taking action. When Charles and Diana started dating, Philip told his son to not waste time, just propose or break it off. When they were feuding, Philip told both of them to stop the affairs, stop fighting, and look at the other's perspective. He consistently pushed his son to take action and intervened when necessary. So what was going on here? Was ordering Diana's death an intervention?
According to Mohammed Al-Fayed, yes. In the inquest, he stated, quote, Princess Diana told me before and during the holiday we shared in July 1997 of her fears. She told me that she knew Prince Philip and Prince Charles were trying to get rid of her. Prince Philip would not accept my son or anyone who is a person of different religion, naturally tanned, curly hair. They would not accept that he would have anything to do with the future king. Prince Philip rules the country behind the scenes. I think Prince Philip is the actual head of the royal family. He is a racist. He was brought up by his aunt who married one of Hitler's generals. This is the man who is in charge, who is manipulating and can do anything. It's time to send him back to Germany from where he comes. You want to know his original name? It ends in Frankenstein.
The name he referred to wasn't literally Frankenstein, but Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glücksburg, a Danish and German royal house. Muhammad was perhaps being a little dramatic here.
He felt he'd been wronged, and he was making a point. Here's how the conspiracy went down, according to the Fayed contingent. Sometime during one of their Mediterranean cruises, Diana became pregnant. Dodi, madly in love with Diana, excited to be a father and ready to finally settle down at the age of 42, proposed. Due to Diana's fame, they had to handle the media carefully. Diana's sons had met Dodi, they'd all vacationed together, but the public needed an opening to their narrative. Remember, everyone was keeping up with her. Diana tipped off the paparazzi on the location of the Jeannical yacht, and infamous photos dubbed The Kiss splashed across every tabloid on August 10th, 1997.
While we can't confirm Diana's motivations here, those photos are verified.
On August 20th, they looked for a ring at Raposi Jewelers in Monte Carlo and picked one from the Tell Me Yes collection. It was a gorgeous ring with 4 huge diamonds shaped like the North Star surrounded by tiny pave diamonds. It was clearly meant to compete with Diana's last engagement ring.
That's the oversized sapphire most recently seen on her daughter-in-law, Duchess Kate's hand.
But Raposi didn't have a ring in Diana's size, so the couple opted to have it altered and pick up the ring that would fit perfectly on Diana's finger from Raposi's other shop in Paris.
On August 30th, they arrived in Paris, in line with the official version we covered last week.
But Mohammed Al-Fayed claims that around 11 p.m. that night, about an hour before the crash, he received a call from Dodi and Diana. They had great news. They were engaged and expecting. Mohammed was thrilled. A wife and child were what he'd always wanted for his beloved son. The couple asked Mohammed to keep it secret, since Diana wanted to tell her children before they announced it to the public. He believed that Diana's announcement, the one she told reporters to prepare for, was that she was engaged and pregnant. No one was supposed to know yet. But Mohammed believes that MI6 and the royal family found out about the pregnancy. They could have learned from a variety of spy methods, but we're apt to believe it was wiretapping.
It's Squidgygate all over again.
And with much worse consequences. If people had been able to pick up and record Diana's phone conversation in the past, well, there's no reason that one of the world's top spy agencies couldn't have been listening in on Diana and Dodi's call with Mohammed and learned of the royal pregnancy.
Or perhaps they eavesdropped on their conversations aboard the Jonicle, many of which would have revolved around plans for a wedding and a baby.
And if the royal family didn't want Diana to be with a dark-skinned Muslim man, as Diana allegedly told Mohammed Al-Fayed, then imagine their ire at discovering the future king would have a dark-skinned Muslim half-sibling and stepfather. The influence Dodi and Dodi's child would have on young Princes William and Harry would have, according to Mohammed, been viewed as a national security threat. Diana and her unborn baby had to be killed before anyone got wind of her news. At some point between Diana discovering she was pregnant and Diana dying in a car crash, MI6 told Prince Philip about the baby. Prince Philip ordered a hit. Prime Minister Tony Blair approved the order. MI6 got to work, but it had to look natural.
And the most natural look for Princess Diana was when she was surrounded by photojournalists.
MI6 knew that Diana would be followed by paparazzi wherever she went, and the spy agency could pin the blame on them. When Diana and Dodi left the Ritz on August 30th, MI6 put their plan in action. As Henri Paul drove them through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, a white Fiat Uno carrying a man and a dog bumped into the Mercedes. Seconds later, an MI6 agent on a motorcycle flashed a strobe light into Henri Paul's face. The combination of the bump and the flash caused the crash, killing both Diana and Dodi.
What about Henri Paul's driving?
In this version of events, Henri was sober, and French pathologists switched Henri Paul's blood samples in the lab. Henri Paul's parents were part of the Al-Fayed legal contingent and, like any parents, wanted any story that didn't involve their son being responsible for 3 deaths, including his own, to be the truth.
Okay. But if the royal family was so Islamophobic, why didn't they interfere in Diana's 2-year relationship with Muslim doctor Hasnat Khan?
That is an excellent question. Perhaps Hasnat Khan had an inkling of the dangers associated with Diana, and that's why he wouldn't marry her, even though many accounts say he was the love of Diana's life. It can also be explained by this other version of this theory. MI6 didn't have a specific plan for August 30th, but had been waiting for a good opportunity to kill Diana and make it look accidental.
That lines up with the letter Diana wrote Paul Burrell and Mohammed Al-Fayed's account of Diana's fears.
Yes, basically what started as an accident was manipulated into murder. That version of the theory goes like this. A drunk driver, wild paparazzi, high speed, no seatbelts, a horrible accident. But here's where it diverges from the official story. Around 12:30 p.m., it appears she isn't horribly injured because she isn't horribly injured. Getting word of the situation from MI6, Prince Philip immediately orders MI6 to interfere, kill Diana, and make it appear that she died from her injuries. MI6 agents delay the trip to the hospital and dose Diana with potentially harmful Hypnovel and fentanyl, and maybe even something else, too.
This would explain the odd timeline in the official version of events, where Diana remains in the tunnel for over an hour, not leaving until 1:41 a.m.
Yes, and also why it took 25 minutes to take her to the hospital when it should have taken less than 15. Amid these delays, MI6 somehow convinced the paparazzi, the French rescue workers, and the French doctors either 1, not to save Diana's life, 2, to keep their mouths shut about this, or 3, that she was beyond saving and really did die as a result of the accident.
That's a lot of work and a lot of people who had to keep quiet.
Exactly. It gets me thinking, is there any hard evidence MI6 was even involved? Or do you think Mohammed Al-Fayed may have seen a few too many James Bond movies?
During the Operation Paget inquest in 2007 and 2008, Sir Richard Dearlove, former head of intelligence at MI6, denied any involvement, as did a manager at MI6 identified as only Miss X. Miss X claimed there was, quote, absolutely no plan whatsoever regarding Diana or Dodi, and MI6 didn't even keep files on them. They did, however, keep a file on thorn in their side, Mohammed Al-Fayed.
But some Operation Paget testimonies provide evidence that MI6 was very involved. Around the end of Operation Paget in 2008, new evidence about the MI6 involvement came to light. Former MI6 agent Richard Tomlinson testified that he'd seen Henri Paul's file while he worked for MI6 and said that Paul was an informant.
And if he was an informant for MI6?
MI6 had eyes on Diana from the moment she left the Ritz until the moment of the crash. In fact, one version of the MI6 theory says Henri Paul was a paid accomplice in the assassination.
In the words of Mohammed Al-Fayed, he was, quote, duped into thinking he'd survive the event.
Here's how that supposedly happened. After he got off his shift at about 7 p.m. on August 30th, Henri Paul went to meet up with MI6 agents. Henri had been working with MI6 for over 10 years. Typically, he merely provided them with information he gleaned from the high-profile international guests staying at the Paris Ritz. But this time, the agents asked him for something more. There would be more money in it, of course. MI6 would make sure Dodi and Diana had dinner at the Paris Ritz. Agents posing as paparazzi would force them to hide there. Then Henri would convince silly, incompetent rich boy Dodi Fayed that when he left the Paris Ritz, he should leave in a lightweight, unprotected Mercedes with just one bodyguard. Henri would help Dodi set up a decoy car, the larger, less destructible one, filled with all of their bodyguards. Then Henri would take an indirect route back towards Dodi's apartment via the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. But Henri had to make sure Dodi thought the entire plan was his idea. That was very important. That was all he had to do. Get them in the car, take them through the tunnel, and ensure Dodi told everyone it was his idea. MI6 agents posing as paparazzi would cover everything else. Of course, Henri would need to keep them updated on the situation, providing signals when he was nearly ready to leave the Ritz. Later, driving along the Seine after midnight, Henri thought the plan had gone off without a hitch. The manager had almost stopped him, reminding Henri that it wasn't his job to drive, but Henri brushed him off easily. It was going so well, he drove a bit faster. The, quote, paparazzi tailed him closely, so he sped up as they entered the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. A bad idea. He clipped a white Fiat Uno as they entered. He was trained in defensive driving, but he wasn't prepared for the bright light that flashed in his face as he tried to correct his course from the bump with the Fiat. he lost control of the car, and it hit a pillar. That was the end of Henri Paul's work with MI6.
Okay, let's look at the evidence that backs up this version of the theory. There are about 3 hours that evening, from approximately 7 to 10 p.m., where Henri Paul was off duty, and his whereabouts are unknown.
And Richard Tomlinson, the former MI6 agent who claims Henri Paul was involved, stated that an unnamed MI6 agent, who happened to be the former secretary to the chief of MI6 and thus privy to even the most confidential operations, had been stationed in Paris that August.
Also, according to Lord J., British ambassador to Paris at the time, there was an MI6 team in Paris staying at the embassy on August 30th.
So MI6 was active in the area. Perhaps during this 3-hour window, Henri Paul interfaced with them. We can only speculate, but Paul, an unmarried security officer, apparently had over $420,000 in modern American dollars between 15 different bank accounts, as well as almost 3,000 modern American dollars on his person, according to the Al Fayed team. They believed this money came from MI6 payouts, since Paul was reported to make only $35,000 a year.
Henri's parents contested that Henri had this kind of money, claiming he'd recently asked them for a loan. But they also contested the evidence that Henri was drunk that night, as the official version claims he was.
Well, they had good reason to. In the blood samples that showed a 0.175% blood alcohol level, which the French authorities used to prove Henri was drunk when he drove Diana, the carbon monoxide level was at 20.7%.
That level of carbon monoxide poisoning would have caused dizziness, confusion, and even headaches, all of which would have made Paul unqualified to drive and more likely to crash the car. All of which also present as symptoms of drinking too much alcohol.
Could he have been poisoned by MI6 after the fact, to avoid an information leak? Or poisoned before he entered the car in order to cause the crash?
But leading up to the fatal drive, no one observed any of these symptoms, or any symptoms that could be construed as drunkenness.
This leads many theorists to believe that Paul's blood samples were switched, and he was framed.
Drunk or not, there were other signs Henri Paul may have been involved in unsavory activity. Security footage from Rue Carbone, the street behind the Ritz, showed Paul waving to the paparazzi 7 minutes before Diana left the hotel and entered the Rue Carbone herself. It's reported that Paul had some sort of contact with the paparazzi on 5 separate occasions throughout the hour before Diana left.
And Richard Tomlinson testified that at least one member of the paparazzi that night was a part-time MI6 agent.
So, is this evidence of a plot? Or was Henri Paul just doing his job as head of security, making sure the rich and famous patrons of the hotel were safe from unwanted photography, and that the paparazzi stayed a reasonable distance from the windows?
Well, what wasn't part of his job was driving guests. And he insisted on driving the getaway car that night.
True. Shortly before the Mercedes left the Ritz, the security manager told Paul it wasn't his job to drive. They had drivers. But Paul allegedly ignored him and drove anyways. Henri Paul had a clear out, but he chose not to take it.
Here's something we've been using at Parcast.
I am always on the go, which makes eating healthy a challenge throughout the day. Luckily, I can throw RX bars in my purse and have a quick, delicious snack to keep me going.
RX Bar is a whole food protein bar made with a few simple, clean ingredients that all serve a purpose, like egg whites for protein, dates to bind, and nuts for texture. And, for full transparency, all of the core ingredients are labeled right on the front of the package.
They are perfect for a quick breakfast, an office snack, or a protein boost during a bike ride, a hike, or a day of travel.
I'm always carrying around the chocolate and sea salt bar. It's like a guilt-free brownie.
With 11 flavor varieties ranging from sweet to savory, there's an RX bar for you.
For 25% off your first order, visit rxbar.com/theories and enter promo code theories at checkout. That's rxbar.com/theories, promo code theories for 25% off your first order.
Now, let's get back to the story.
In addition to the allegation against Henri Paul, Tomlinson's testimony included further evidence that MI6 was involved. Tomlinson claimed that in 1992, while employed at MI6, he worked on operations in Serbia. He'd been privy to plans to assassinate the socialist Serbian president, Slobodan Milosevic. According to Tomlinson, MI6 had 3 different proposed assassination scenarios.
Here's the third scenario, taken from Tomlinson's sworn affidavit.
Quote, Milosevic could be assassinated by causing his personal limousine to crash, proposed. To arrange the crash in a tunnel, because the proximity of concrete close to the road would ensure that the crash would be sufficiently violent to cause death or serious injury and would also reduce the possibility that there might be independent casual witnesses. Suggested that one way to cause the crash might be to disorientate the chauffeur using a strobe flash gun, a device which is occasionally deployed by special forces to, for example, disorientate helicopter pilots or terrorists, and about which MI6 officers are briefed about during their training.
A strobe flash gun?
That's less lethal than it sounds. It's essentially a handheld fancy bright light that flashes incredibly quickly. Some are used defensively to disorient people. Others are used by photographers to sync up light flashes with their rapid camera clicks.
During the Operation Paget inquest, former MI6 chief Serdirlov confirmed that this plan to assassinate President Milosevic had been considered but rejected.
So Tomlinson believed they recycled the plan for Princess Diana.
The most interesting part of the strobe light plan is that it matches the testimony of 2 witnesses from the night. Though officially, there was no flash or strobe light.
But let's look at those witness accounts. 2 men recounted their experiences in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel that night, Francois Levistre and Brian Anderson. At about 12:22 a.m. on August 31st, witness Brian Anderson rode through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in a taxi. He noticed 4 motorbikes, quote, cluster in a swarm around the Mercedes, end quote. Suddenly, Anderson saw a, quote, significant flash of light, followed by a very loud bang. Seconds later, the Mercedes S280 carrying Princess Diana crashed. At the same time, Levistre, driving with his wife, entered the tunnel, followed by the Mercedes. A motorcycle sped up behind them, passing the Mercedes. A flash lit up the tunnel, quote, like the light from a police speed camera. The car crashed, the motorcyclist stopped, and one of them made a, quote, mission accomplished gesture.
However, Levistre was later confirmed to be a pathological liar when he gave conflicting witness statements. Levistre's wife, who was right next to him, had no recollection of a flash before the crash.
Serdirlov, speaking for MI6, denied any association with a flash or a crash. They deemed Tomlinson a conspiracy theorist and a liar. But just to put it out there, isn't that exactly what MI6 would do if they had assassinated Diana?
Yes, but for reference, Tomlinson's relationship with his former employer was complicated. Tomlinson was dismissed from MI6 in 1995 and briefly jailed in 1997 after attempting to get a book about his experiences working for MI6 published. MI6 believed this book would expose national secrets.
If Tomlinson had already experienced the punishment for sharing MI6 secrets, what did he have to lose? Why not expose what he believed to be the truth? This almost makes him more believable.
But he also had a negative relationship with MI6 and a clear desire for a book deal. So in his 2008 testimony for Operation Paget, either 1, Tomlinson was a real whistleblower hoping to expose necessary info to the public, 2, Tomlinson sought to sabotage his former employer, whom he was angry with, or 3, Tomlinson was just trying to parlay his time in MI6 into a book deal and capitalizing on public interest.
Right. It comes down to Tomlinson's words versus MI6's.
And it appears neither of them are trustworthy.
Two things I keep coming back to in this theory: the paparazzi and the white Fiat Uno.
Officially, the paparazzi were cleared and the Uno was never found.
But in one variation of the MI6 killed Diana theory, the Fiat was never officially found because MI6 covered it up and killed its driver. In the week leading up to Diana's death, she was photographed by journalist James Anderson, a Frenchman. Anderson was one of these media contacts Diana gave tips to. During the initial investigation, he claimed Diana gave him permission and means to photograph her for half an hour every day on her vacation with Dodi in Saint-Tropez that July, so long as she was left alone for the rest of the day. The agreement gave Diana more control over her image and made Anderson rich.
We do know for a fact that Anderson's team sold the tabloids many high-quality photos of this trip. When questioned in 1998, Anderson claimed that once Diana went to Paris, he returned home to Lignières, France, 150 miles away. He was pleased with the exclusive shots he got and had a been-there-done-that attitude about photographing Diana in Paris.
But in this variation of the MI6 conspiracy theory, Anderson lied to the French authorities. On August 30th, he followed Diana to Paris without telling the rest of his team. He was eager for more photos of the princess. For some reason, he took his Labrador with him. After midnight on August 31st, he followed the Mercedes within the horde of reporters eager to capture Diana's sparkling life. He drove his white Fiat Uno with his dog next to him. His dog was wearing a red bandana. As he picked up speed going downhill into the tunnel, Anderson got just a little too close to the Mercedes S280, bumping it. Seconds later, the Mercedes crashed. His vicinity to the crash afforded him the best angles, and allegedly, Anderson snapped incredible and shocking photos of Diana's death. He never stated what specifically he photographed, but apparently it was damning evidence that MI6 was involved. Realizing his work was done, Anderson managed to slip away without being noticed by the MI6 agents on the scene or the police, avoiding having to turn over his film as evidence, which the other paparazzi were forced to do. Hearing the news Diana had died the next day, and that the paparazzi were suspects, Anderson laid low. He was upset, feeling guilty. He'd liked Diana. Was he partly responsible for her death? He hoped not.
That October, he sold the 10-year-old white Fiat Uno, which had recently been repainted at a garage in Châteauroux. The police confirmed this and inspected the car during the initial investigation.
By selling the car, Anderson was hoping it wouldn't be traced to him. But in February 1998, the authorities tracked him down. Anderson lied to French Commandant Moulet, hoping he wouldn't be implicated.
Anderson told the commandant he wasn't in Paris at the time. He claimed to be at home in Lignières that night, and then to have left at 4 a.m. to drive to Orly Airport, and flew to Corsica on an assignment. He was able to produce the plane ticket and some receipts from that morning. His wife later confirmed this, but his son didn't. Anderson's son said his father wasn't home that night.
In 2000, once the paparazzi were no longer suspect in Diana's death, Anderson was finally ready to reveal the crash photos, but looking for the right buyer. He claimed to his friends they were explosive. However, according to this theory, the alleged photos contained evidence of MI6 involvement, and somehow MI6 got wind of it. They couldn't have these photos released to the public, or worse, to Mohammed Al-Fayed. In a universe where MI6 killed 3 people, including a beloved famous Brit, well, what's one dead Frenchman to keep the secret safe? So MI6 agents tracked down Anderson. They forced him to write a suicide note of sorts addressed to his boss.
The note received by the head of SIPA Photo Agency read, quote, "From this date on, pay my photo rights directly to my wife."
Then they killed James Anderson. shooting him in the head and leaving him in a burning car in the woods.
That's the incident we covered in the teaser, which was officially determined to be a suicide.
But was it a suicide, or was it a hit? There's a variation of this theory where Anderson was working for MI6 and paid to bump his car into Diana's, but the evidence there is very thin. It's much more likely he snapped damning photos of MI6 agents at the scene, but it's all just a theory.
One last fact. When Anderson's wife was questioned, she confirmed that they had a large dog and that the dog had a red bandana.
In court, all of Mohammed Al-Fayed's MI6 did it theories were taken down by the fact that they were just too complex. Too many people and factors had to come together just right to kill Diana and Dodi and cover it up.
The British authorities were convinced Diana's death was an accident, but they had a different worldview than Mohammed Al-Fayed did. Looking at the events through Egyptian culture, Diana put herself in danger. Egyptian news publicized Diana's death as a murder from the start. In the Muslim world, women aren't allowed to marry outside their faith, so if Diana got engaged to Dodi Fayed, she was truly crossing a line. To them, white, Anglican Diana's death was the logical outcome once she dated a Muslim man.
But the royal family and MI6 came from a different worldview, where Diana's marriage to a Muslim man would have been frowned upon, but not worth the trouble of an elaborate murder conspiracy.
Mohammed Al-Fayed remains convinced that his son and the princess were murdered. He refuses to believe anything else, so insistent that even one of his own lawyers, George Kijman, quit on him.
Most recently, Mohammed Al-Fayed financed a documentary about the events of August 30th and 31st titled Unlawful Killing.
The film premiered at Cannes in 2011, but due to its content, it was unable to secure insurance to exhibit the film in the UK or US. The legal team recommended 87 cuts to avoid being sued, but Mohammed refused to make them, still strong in his convictions about Prince Philip, MI6, and the death of Princess Diana. So, does this theory hold up?
I side with the court on this one. While one set of events would be plausible, there are too many variables proposed. With all these theories and versions of theories, Al-Fayed and his team, while thorough, were throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck.
I agree, it's too broad to be true. The only thing that trips me up is James Anderson. The details of his story and his suspicious death really make me second-guess the official story. We'll call this a 7 out of 10 for believability. I almost want to side with Mohammed Al-Fayed here, but we need just a little more evidence.
Going through this theory, you really feel for Mohammed. His son was tragically torn from him, and his pain only exacerbated by the fact that it will always be a side note in someone else's story.
It's true. On a deeper level, one reason Mohammed Al-Fayed might push these conspiracy theories is that he needs to clear his own name. Like we discussed last week, Diana and Dodi died traveling between Al-Fayed properties in an Al-Fayed car driven by an Al-Fayed employee. If Mohammed could blame anyone else for his son's death, he wouldn't have to blame himself. Our last theory is the most optimistic.
Theory number 3. Diana chose to disappear.
It's clear Diana's life was crazy, and there was only one escape from constant attention and public scrutiny: death.
So what if Diana faked her own death? The car crash was just a show, and Diana and Dodi, after some plastic surgery, are living happily on a private island, or perhaps in a chalet in the Swiss Alps, a favorite ski destination for the royal family. Mohammed Al-Fayed puts on a big show about conspiracy theories to deter everyone from discovering the real answer, and William and Harry, who of course would be in on it, keep their mother's secret out of love.
On her last vacation with Dodi, Diana spoke to Richard Kay, one of her reporter contacts who worked for the Daily Mail. Kay recounted that Diana told him she had decided to radically change her life. She was going to complete her obligations to her charities and then, around November, would completely withdraw from her formal public life.
What if this radical change was even more radical than Kay had believed?
This theory also explains why guests at the Ritz reported Diana crying at dinner that night.
Yes, anyone who planned to dramatically change everything they knew and leave everyone they loved would cry at least a little.
And she was struggling with her mental health.
Maybe it was even prescribed by a psychologist. After 16 years in an unending spotlight, the most photographed woman in the world deserved a break.
We like this theory the best, simply because it's the most optimistic, even though it's the least believable. I'd give it a 2 out of 10.
Unfortunately, there's very little evidence of this theory. In 20 years, someone would have tracked Diana down or slipped up on the secret.
It's pure wishful thinking, imagining Princess Diana with the happiness she deserved.
With the conclusion of our main theories, we have one more wild card to throw out there before we tell you which we think is the most likely version of events.
Right. Conspiracy theories are known for taking bizarre turns, and we can't properly cover them without mentioning some of the more eccentric ones.
The wild card theory? Diana's death had nothing to do with her, and the accident was planned by enemies of the Fayeds, who were targeting Dodi. Diana's death was just a byproduct of another assassination, much like how Archduke Franz Ferdinand's wife died because she was next to him when he was assassinated.
There's not strong evidence to back this theory up.
But it is all over the internet.
It's worth mentioning because people talk about it. And a huge factor in conspiracy theories isn't logic, but what people want to believe.
This one might not be very well founded, but it's not impossible. The Fayeds were 1%ers, so we can't say no one was jealous of them or had been pushed down on their rise to the top. If we learned one thing from investigating the MI6 theory, it's that Mohammed al-Fayed had quite the personality and certainly rubbed some people the wrong way. There's no way this family didn't have a couple of enemies.
The strongest piece of evidence? In 1997, Dodi Fayed employed 2 bodyguards. Princess Diana employed none.
It's entertaining to consider that everyone's been looking at the wrong target the whole time.
But if that's the case, who's to say they weren't killed by enemies of Henri Paul or of Trevor Rees-Jones?
Fair point. Okay, time for our verdict. After much research and thought, we believe Diana died as the result of a tragic car accident.
She may have aggravated the royal family to no end, but they weren't going to have her killed. And if they wanted that, it would have happened long before 1997. There were too many other people working on the anti-landmine campaign to justify killing just one spokeswoman, and faking her own death would have been just too much trouble when Diana hadn't even taken a step back from royal duties yet.
After 6 collective years of investigation between the initial inquiry and Operation Paget, if there was one strong, logical conspiracy theory that stood out above the rest, it would have risen to the top.
Over 20 years later, we're still puzzling over an abundance of theories and wondering what if. The persistence of these conspiracy theories tells us just one thing. No matter how she died, society is not ready to forget Princess Diana. She remains, in a sense, alive, a bittersweet undertone in the lives of her sons, inspiring empathy for the latest in a line of cold, calculated rulers, and impacting the royals' public image from the grave.
And in that way, her legacy will always live. Thanks for tuning in to Conspiracy Theories. If you want to hear more conspiracy theories, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, or your favorite podcast directory. If you like what you hear, please leave a 5-star review. I know, it seems simple, but it really helps our show.
And don't forget to subscribe. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Parcast, and on Twitter at Parcast Network. Let us know what your favorite theory is.
Join us next week as we explore another conspiracy theory.
Until then, remember, the truth isn't always the best story.
And the official story isn't always the truth. Conspiracy Theories was created by Max Cutler, is a production of Cutler Media, and is part of the Parcast Network. It is produced by Max and Ron Cutler, sound design by Ron Shapiro, with production assistance by Maggie Admire and Carly Madden. Conspiracy Theories is written by Maggie Admire and stars Molly Brandenburg and Carter Roy. I can't wait to get home. I should have a package from Mack Weldon waiting on me.
That's the company we talked about at the beginning of the show, right?
Yep. Mack Weldon ships smart design basics for men, like underwear and t-shirts made of premium fabrics, right to your door. Everything I have ordered has been insanely comfortable.
And our listeners can save 20% on their first order from Mack Weldon.
Go to MackWeldon.com and get 20% off your purchase using the promo code THEORIES.
You're listening to the Internet Audio Feed.